Welcome back to the Nightly News on NBC. Tonight our guest is President Kennedy, arguably one of the best presidents that's ever lived. A lot has happened during his tenure, and it's a privilege to have him on the show. Thank you for being here, Mr. President.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Mr. President, I know international relations have been tense with certain nations. Could you give us a quick update?
Well, as you all know, the Cuban Missile Crisis came to a conclusion last year, and it was a very serious matter. Cuba was housing some of the Soviets' nuclear weapons inside of the nation, and it was very close to the United States, but thankfully we had it under control, and now that issue is in the past.
So could you tell us a little bit about the Bay of Pigs? Did that have anything to do with the Cuban Missile Crisis?
As you all know, the Bay of Pigs did not turn out the way I envisioned it when I thought of the mission. The purpose of it was we sent some Cuban exiles who were living in America back to Cuba. Fortunately, Fidel Castro, the dictator of Cuba, was informed that we were going to be sending some troops there, and he was prepared for their arrival, and they were held hostage. And it was just a very unfortunate situation. Thankfully, it was resolved, and we're moving on to some new things now.
It seems like a very delicate situation, but it seems like you're handling it very well. I know you're no stranger to being on television. What do you think about the advance in this technological field?
I really think it's amazing. It was a privilege to be part of the first televised presidential debate with Richard Nixon. I think it really helped me connect with the people of this great nation, and I think that's amazing.
Before we let you go, Mr. President, do you think that the U.S. will put a man on the moon before the deadline you set at the end of the decade?
Oh, we definitely will. The reason I expanded our space exploration program last year was so that we could compete with and ultimately outperform the Soviets.
Do you think that NASA will help advance America's status among the most technologically advanced nations?
I really do believe that NASA will take space exploration into the next phase, putting a man on the moon and bringing him home safely.
Well, thank you for your time, Mr. President. It's been a real honor speaking with you.
As you. God bless America.
Have fun in Dallas. I'd like to welcome another guest onto the show, Floyd Quincy, a Los Angeles native. He's going to talk about his opinion on Vietnam and other controversial issues.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
No problem, Floyd. How are you doing today?
Far out, man. This scene is sick. How about yourself?
I'm doing quite alright, Mr. Floyd. I was curious on what your thoughts were on the current situation in Vietnam.
Man, Vietnam's a drag. It's the feds trying to get us involved in a war we're not supposed to be fighting. We're fighting against ourselves, man. Think about all the people being separated from their families. It's not cool.
These times have created political and cultural unrest and bred many civil counterculture movements. Where do you stand on that?
I'm totally with all the counterculture movements, whether it be anti-war protests or Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington. I'm all for it.
What have you been up to lately?
Well, I was just at the Woodstock Music Festival in upstate New York. It was groovy, man. Hendrix, Santana, Canned Heat, Janis Joplin, man, and The Who. Man, it was great.
If you had 3 words to describe Woodstock, what would they be?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man.
Wow, sounds interesting. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Floyd.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm digging the scene.
Later. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nightly News on NBC. Tonight we have a very special guest, President Richard Nixon.
Hello, thanks for having me, and I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I got.
I didn't ask you that, but okay, thanks for letting us know. Anyway, we know that you have run for president in the past against the late JFK, who won the election in 1960. What do you think put you over the top in the election of '68?
I believe that I won the presidency primarily because of the improper execution of the war of the former administration, and I also think that the people saw that I would be able to improve the situation. I think that's my main thing. I was able to improve the situation.
And what are your thoughts on Vietnam?
Well, I had a plan called Vietnamization, where 66% of combat troops were withdrawn by the end of 1971. It was also meant to extend, equip, and train South Vietnam forces and assign them to an increasing combat war. In 1972, we sent 105,000 pieces of military equipment, including, but not limited to, M48 tanks, 175mm self-propelled artillery guns, anti-tank weapons, 5 squadrons of F-5 fighter jets, 3 squadrons of A-37 fighter bombers, 2 squadrons of CH-47 heavy transport planes.
Wow.
Then, on January 23, 1973, North and South Vietnam signed a ceasefire agreement, which also required the immediate withdrawal of all U.S. troops who were training in the SVA. This was a blessing to the U.S. for the end of a deadly war.
How do you think the public reacted to the Vietnam War?
Well, I know almost all the American public was against it, because it was one of the first televised wars in our history. We saw our loved ones die, live on air. We saw the whole effects of our war on our troops and our society. We saw a war that wasn't our war, and we decided it wasn't worth fighting.
Wow, that's a very deep sub, Mr. President.
I'm not a crook.
Can you tell us more about this war on drugs policy you have adopted?
Well, as you know, I dramatically increased the funding and the amount of federal drug control agencies. The purpose is to reduce the amount of drugs and catch the dealers to keep this country as drug-free as we can humanly do.
I'm sure that will go great. What was your reaction to being the president that landed the first man on the moon?
I was very blessed to be able to hold office during this great accomplishment in United States history.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, Mr. President. It was great to have you on. With your landslide victory in your most recent election, it seemed like you were spying on the Democrats or something.
Thanks for having me.
Allow me to introduce myself.
How long is it going to take us to film this? We need 12 minutes of film. We can't even do a clip. Welcome back to the Nightly News on NBC. Tonight our guest is President...
Eventually signed a January which required the immediate removal of all United States troops that were there training the Vietnamese and